Hi folks, good afternoon. Come on guys. We have such a fantastic panel session out there. Don't worry about all of that. Let's enjoy for today and then worry about all the diseases later on. Okay. But it was an exceedingly informative presentation. Thanks for all the panelists. My name is Vijay Kumar. I'm from the 1969 batch, and it is my privilege to introduce a close friend of mine, an exceedingly brilliant academic, and somebody who genuinely cares about the world and society in particular. Okay, so let me just give you a brief introduction in terms of what he's achieved so far. First of all, he went to Don Bosco. Okay. Second, after that, he went to BRITS Pilani. I know there are a few BRITS Pilani folks out here. After that, he went to MIT, got a PhD from MIT. He then went to Purdue, got tenure there, and then decided to go back to India. He has been associated with the Indian Institute of Science for the last more than 20-25 years. He teaches computational mathematics, computer science, and he's also, in addition to being an academician, he's also an entrepreneur. Let me just give you a little bit of his academic background, a little bit more before I go on to the entrepreneurial side. Dr. Chandru was awarded, recently selected as a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. This just happened a couple of months back. And prior to that, he was also elected a fellow of the Indian Academy of Sciences. At Indian Institute of Science, essentially, 1997 or 1998 was the first time that the Indian Institute of Science allowed faculty members out there to also become entrepreneurs. He started, in fact, there's a picture of him with Ratan Tata, because the firm that he started, Strand Genomics, or Strand Life Sciences, was the first under that genre at the Indian Institute of Science. They've done extensive work in that area, and the firm was recently acquired by Reliance back in India. Dr. Chandru also worked extensively with the Indian Institute of Science in various technological development initiatives. They have something, I think it's called the Art Club at Indian Institute of Science. He mentors a large number of folks out there. He's also participated in the World Economic Forum meetings, serves on the boards of several companies, including non-profits. His ultimate aim is to make sure that there are, in the public health sphere, that there are no orphan diseases in India, and he's got a very ambitious target for 2030. He works extensively with a whole bunch of scientists all over India and in the US. He also forgot to mention that he's a visiting scientist at the Harvard Chan School of Public Health. I think I've said enough. I'll hand the floor over to my close friend, and above all, somebody who truly believes that science and technology can be used for the common good, and you have a living example, or he's going to share with you some of his experiences in that field as well. And before I need to say this as well, Dr. Chandru is also, we're exceedingly fortunate that he is with us today. Some of you may remember that in 2005, at the Indian Institute of Science, there was a terrorist attack. Dr. Chandru is a survivor from that attack. He still has 4 bullets, I think, in his body, but that has not deterred him from whatever he is continuing to do so far, and in fact, I think it's spurred him to do a lot more. So thank you, and hand over the floor to Dr. Chandru.
So thank you so much, Vijay. That was a very, very generous introduction, and it's delightful to be here. So I'm sort of an overseas, participant, but I'm also very plugged into the US. So I'm really part of the corridor. Go up and down. So it just so happened that I was coming for the AAAS conference and planning workshop, so I stayed on here for this event. I titled the presentation after the DB motto. Versus in Artius, another way to think about it is I think, grit with grace, right? I think in many ways, recovery from the terrorist attack and, getting back to work and, just being able to do all that reflects in many ways the kind of exposure we had in Don Bosco, and I think it certainly molded me in so many ways. Actually, this is a very easy follow-on to the last panel because I was trained in AI at MIT in the late 70s, early 80s. That was very early times of AI, and a lot of what I do is actually applying AI in health, and so it is, but also through an entrepreneurial vision. So at the Center for Brain Research, I think we'll have to follow up with Fabian. By the way, Thomas Health is a good friend. I don't know where Fabian is, but and so we'll be delighted to follow up on the work at the Center for Brain Research. We also, it is a philanthropic center set up by Chris Gopalakrishnan, focused on neurodegenerative disorders. So this is exactly what we're doing in the Indian context. And of course, Vijay mentioned Strand. He also mentioned ArtPark. ArtPark is the Artificial Intelligence and Robotics Tech Park at the Indian Institute of Science. It's our translational center. And so again, we do a lot of work, including in epidemiology and wastewater testing. So, again, maybe chat with Chetan later about this. So let me jump in and say a little bit about the entrepreneurial journey as well. I have a little line down there saying that entrepreneurship in biotechnology is only for the lion hearts, right? because it is in India, particularly because of, I think, what Hari mentioned this morning, the sophistication of the capital markets, the innovation in capital. It's a challenge to find patient capital to work on problems in biotechnology or healthcare at the innovation level. At the deployment level, you can find business models, but I think at the innovation level it's quite challenging. Down now. Okay, good. Got it. So, memories of Don Bosco. I think Father Mallon was mentioned. He was the principal when Vincent, of course, yeah. He was the sports captain. But, yeah. Father Vincent, of course, our cricket coach was Kannan. And so this memory of that remains with me is our cricket team. And of course, I'm standing behind Ashok Tamaswamy, who was the captain of the junior team. And we actually, I recall when seeing Father Mallon's picture that he used to come and tell us that he wanted to bat. So he would take the bat and then he would say, throw me a good ball. That means he had to give him a full toss. and he could whack it then, right? But as long as you hold it on the pitch, you'd say, no, that's not a good ball. Give me a good ball. Right? So that, great memories. And oops, I turned it the wrong way. Okay. So 30 years later, Pilani, MIT, Purdue, and then back to India, and in the 90s, meet up with kindred spirits at all faculty in computer science. From left to right, it's Vinay Vishwanathan, Swami Manohar, myself, and Ramesh Hariharan. And we're all in the computer science department. And Ratan Tata comes to preside over the court of the Indian Institute of Science, which is always done by a Tata. So he says, how come there's no faculty entrepreneurship? This is 1998. And, how come there are no companies? You guys have spun off ISRO, you've spun off HAL, NAL, HMT, lots of public sector, but where are the private companies? So that night we write to the director and say, what is the process? We are ready to start companies. And so we are the guinea pigs, right? And then here's Mr. Tata visiting our labs in 2001 when the companies were up and running. And we did two things. We made India's first handheld computer called the Simputer. It was a Linux handheld machine with a touchscreen. Probably even now Apple loses lawsuits to battles with Samsung, because Samsung points to the computer and says prior art, right? Because we had actually done a lot of what went into the iPhone and so on. But again, lack of capital, sophistication in India to actually take something like this forward. Otherwise, India could have been early with the smartphone. We were about 4 years ahead of both Apple and Samsung with the features of a smartphone, right? And of course, Strand Life Sciences and Strand Genomics. Incidentally, Strand is the first example in India of sanctioned entrepreneurship from the university, where the university actually took a stake in the company, and professors were allowed to be the promoters. And so in a way, it was sort of historic that Ratan Tata again played an important role. Now, the important thing to realize is that there have been two extraordinary exponential technologies that our generation have been witness to. And we're all very enamored, of course, of Moore's law, the exponential law of information processing, which, of course, has had phenomenal impact. But along the same historic timeline, you've also seen molecular biology go through extraordinary revolution, right? And in both cases, we've had exponential loss, which means that the technology has been doubling at some frequency. With Moore's law, it was every 18 months. Gordon Moore, of course, being the chairman of Intel, had sort of put together this analysis, and that held for so many years. We are right now at 2 to the 40 times, because Fairchild started in 1958, and ever since then, Moore's law has been applying. With genome sequencing, we went from $100 million, which is what it cost Craig Venter to do the first human genome at Celera, to now $100. It's somewhere between $100 to $200 to sequence your full human genome, right? So it's gone down by about 1 million times in roughly 20 years. So, and it'll keep, keep going down and get faster, cheaper. You can now sequence in about a few hours. So one of the first things we did once Reliance put money into Strand was went out and bought the best sequencer there is available in the world today, and that's the NovaSeq X Plus from Illumina, and it costs about $1.5 million, about 12 crores. But this machine can do up to actually 130 whole genomes in one night. And also the price point, because you can sequence at such volume, we have been able to bring down the cost of doing a whole exome, that is all the genes, all 20,000 genes, and give a report and a counseling session for just about $150 in India, about 12,000 rupees. Right? So this is now becoming possible. I mean, and Mukesh Ambani of Reliance, when he looked at Strand and acquired us, he basically said, I want you to democratize genomics. And basically means take this population scale, right? Which is what he specializes in. Now, why is this important for India? And I think we touched a little bit on South Asia specific, ethnicity, race, etc. in the previous session. But in India, remember, we have such long-standing practices of endogamy, marrying within communities, and consanguinity in the South, where we marry relatives within the families. And that is bound to have some impact on genetics. And how many of you have read The Covenant of Water? Yeah, there's quite a few hands going up. It's an extraordinary story, and of course Oprah Winfrey will probably make it into a Netflix serial at some point. But you know, it's Abraham Verghese has done a multi-generational story in the Travancore area of his own, I guess, Syrian Christian sort of knowledge of the Syrian Christian community, and based on some notes that his mother had put down. And one of the things about the story is that there is a condition which goes through the generations, and that condition happens to be a genetic trait, right? And I think it, in many ways, sort of defines the lives of the people involved in the story. Right? And it's the condition is the covenant of water, but it's actually a neuroma that creates tumors in the eardrum, which actually affects sense of balance, and that's why people drown because of that. India, basically has this legacy of genetic disorders. It's believed that somewhere between 40 to 70 million, 40 million is probably closer to the truth. People affected by rare genetic disorders of various kinds. And these are orphan diseases. They're called orphan because they're truly orphan. Right? Pharma companies used to not, consider them important to work on because the patient community is too small, the market is too small. Public health would ignore them, saying we have bigger fish to worry about. We have TB, we have HIV, so many other disorders. So these orphan diseases simply get orphaned. And I think orphan drugs began to get special favor from the FDA by the mid-80s. And therefore, there are pharmaceutical companies that are dedicated more and more to creating therapeutics. And then we have the whole genomics revolution with CRISPR and gene editing and gene therapies. And getting very exciting. I think technology is accelerating incredibly fast. I think the question of when these will all become available and affordable to India is the big challenge. And that's the challenge that a bunch of us are working on. Now, the interesting thing, I wonder if this will play, is the volume? there's a video playing. Right. So this is the Chief Justice of India, who has two foster daughters
myopathy,
who have
genetic condition which they had inherited at birth. They were born in Uttarakhand before they came into our lives around 2014. There were no testing facilities, even in major institutes in India. And where there were testing facilities, such as the Postgraduate Institute in Lucknow, we were told that the test then was so invasive and so painful that they would remove a part of the tissue from the child without anesthesia. It was so terribly painful. And I still remember the time when the test was done. The test had to be done for both the children. And after the older child underwent the test, all that she could say in that sense of pain and suffering for the test, she said, "Don't allow my sister to go through this test." There was an absence of adequate testing, absence of schools in Uttarakhand. When the children came to us in Allahabad, the sole school which was run by the good Mr. Banerjee for children with disabilities had shut down because Mr. Banerjee was no more. But the children would always have little school bags at home with a snack box and their bottle of water because that represented their feelings. They aspired to go to school. So they would play school with their own little bags. When we moved to Delhi, we found a school for them, which was Tamanna, run by the redoubtable Dr. Chawna. And she said that this is not a school for these children. This is a school for children suffering from predominantly autism. These children are fine because they have a genetic condition, but they are mentally as razor sharp as any other child. And gradually she said we have to mainstream these children, which is what we did. Thinking of sending them to a good school, so we went to various schools, and the first question that we asked was, how will the other children treat these children in school? And will the school have any sense of policy to ensure that these children are not bullied, that these children are not disparaged, because that will really set them back. And the principals of so many schools told us that, well, children are children, so they'll have to survive amongst other children. Until we found Sanskriti, and they said that we have many.
This is the Chief Justice of India. And in 2014, when his foster daughters were painfully tested, he could have come to a lab like Strand, and we would have just needed blood, saliva, or dried blood spot, and we would have diagnosed Nebelin myopathy. But, it was not known to the medical community that these technologies are available. It would have cost about 30,000 rupees, which was a princely sum then. Now it's, around 10,000 rupees to be able to do these types of diagnosis. But I think that the challenge is huge, and I think the need to leverage this technology, scale it, and so on. And if any country can do it, India can. I think. Look at what we've done with telecom, look what we've done with financial inclusion. I think we are going to do this now with orphan diseases, where I think nobody else in the world will do it for us. We have to do it ourselves. So we've put together a master plan, and one of the reasons I've set up now a CRISPR company is that we believe that we have to master now the gene editing technology, and so I've spent a few weeks now in Berkeley with Jennifer Doudna's group, trying to get their help, and I think we have the intellectual power in India to do all these things. It's just it's a question of being able to put the plans together. Now, the other aspect is, of course, that we have to work with the public health authorities, and that's, of course, a challenge, but I think the biotech industry is actually quite sophisticated now. India has about 10,000 startups in biotech. Bangalore alone has maybe about 1,000 startups. There's a lot of energy and sophistication and capability that is very rapidly building up. And, Nifty will continue to grow, I think, with all of this. So we've moved from analysis, advocacy, and now it's time for action. So I won't go through everything that was mentioned here, but of course, I think we do have a lot going on with universal healthcare, the Ayushman Bharat digital mission. I'm actually working at Harvard on the Lancet Citizens Commission for Reimagining India's Health System. That report will come out in about 3 months. I think you will see a lot of AI in healthcare being leveraged, lots of bioengineering, biotechnology as well. I just want to end with a little message for all of you, and if any of you would like to participate in the No Disease Orphan initiative, here's the message. There's a little bit of water.
Find a vaccine against COVID. Look inside the atom. Land on the moon. Map the human genome. Personalized medicine. If you are generous enough to donate $5,000, we'll aim it at another impossible challenge. 40 million Indians suffer from rare genetic disorders. We're building the foundation for India. No disease orphan by 2030. And you can help us see it.
So I just end with that last image of the website that we're working on. We're working on the mission of No Disease Orphan. We are now starting to put together an interventional genomics initiative. I think the initial investment to start it off would be about $2 million, and I've already put up about 10% of that. Looking for people to join in this mission, not just because of the money, but also I think the more people who participate, the more successful this will be. And eventually to build a specialty pediatric center where this kind of work can be done. My daughter is a surgeon at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I see what is possible. I think it's time India has a specialty pediatric hospital that can actually take on this type of challenge. So I think that's the mission, and would love to work with DB friends and colleagues who feel motivated. Thank you.